My heart goes to all the hostages and their families. I wish there were no need for us to be here today. Women have very little to say, if at all, in starting wars. But women and children are those who suffer the most from the consequences of war. And the report, which is launched here today, is a very sad reminder of this truth. And yet it was only in 2000 when, for the first time ever, the United Nations Security Council devoted a separate discussion to women and recognized the unique gendered vulnerabilities and sufferings of women as victims of war, paying special emphasis on the use of women's bodies as weapons of war throughout history, and the duty of all those involved in conflicts to provide women with special protection against such acts. Since the adoption of Security Council Resolution 1325 in 2000, the UN adopted a number of resolutions, all forming what's known as the Women, Peace and Security Framework, a great promise. For our purposes here, 1325 and all those other resolutions, they all pay special attention to conflict-related sexual violence, recognizing sexual violence as a weapon and tactic of war, noting that rape and other forms of sexual violence constitute a war crime, a crime against humanity, or even an act with respect to genocide. The 1998 Rome Statute, which established the International Criminal Court, also defines sexual crimes as war crimes and as crimes against humanity. And so, already in the morning of October 9th, a group of us, international law and women's rights professors and experts, reached out to various UN bodies, including the CEDAW Committee, the CRC, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, special mandate holders, and UN Women. We described the unspeakable brutality of the atrocities committed by Hamas, stating the obvious. These are war crimes, crimes against humanity, possibly genocide, that these very international law norms framed. And we stressed the obvious, that the hostages are defined according to international law as victims of enforced disappearances, that all the hostages are being held in contravention of international law and should be released immediately. In relation to women and children who are still being held, it is the clear duty of those very human rights bodies whose mandate is the protection of women and children to demand their immediate and unconditional release. By failing to voice this demand, they undermine their integrity and the trust in the fulfillment of their mandate. However, to our great dismay and disbelief, these human rights bodies overwhelmingly declined to condemn Hamas, ignored all the sexual crimes that were committed on October 7th by Hamas, and rarely, if ever, called for the release of the hostages. Let me be clear. I do not deny for a moment the suffering of innocent women and children in Gaza. I am concerned with the loss of life in Gaza, including the number of women and children who are victims of this armed conflict. However, at the same time, it cannot be denied that the abuse and sexual violence of women and the continued holding of hostages constitute crimes against humanity. By turning a blind eye to the October 7th massacre, to the unprecedented and premeditated extreme cruelty of the sexual violence committed by Hamas, these UN bodies not only fail us, but they undermine the very purpose for which they were established, and in fact undermine the whole international human rights system. Moreover, they are complicit in the campaign of denial launched by Hamas and its allies. They give ammunition to those who dare claim that the October 7th massacre never happened. And the worst, by failing to mention the ongoing war crime of holding hostages, they legitimize disappearance of people and the taking of hostages, not only at present, but possibly encouraging such acts in the future. for the women, children, and babies who are currently held hostage, the refusal of these human rights bodies to take a stand is a betrayal of their prime duty to respect, protect, and promote the human rights of all human beings. The silence of international human rights and women's rights community is deafening. For those of us who believed in the power of international human rights institutions and in solidarity between women, it is a particularly devastating blow. The betrayal is not only to the hostages and to the victims of sexual abuse, but to the very integrity of these institutions and of the international human rights framework at large. We call you to act now, to stand with us.